the lone wolf mentality. Jake Walker had always been the type to go it alone. Whether at work, in his personal life, or even in small everyday situations, he believed relying on others was a sign of weakness. People let you down. People slowed you down. It was better to depend on yourself and yourself alone. That was the mindset that had carried him through college, through years of grueling late nights at work, and through a life that, while successful on paper, felt increasingly isolating. At 32, Jake was a project manager at a competitive marketing firm in downtown Chicago. He was known for his ability to handle massive workloads without complaint. His coworkers admired his efficiency, his discipline, his seemingly unshakable self-sufficiency. What they didn't know was that Jake spent most nights hunched over his laptop until 2 a.m., running on caffeine and sheer willpower, pushing himself to the limit while avoiding the growing loneliness that gnawed at him. "Need a hand with that, Jake?" Maya, a colleague, asked one afternoon as she passed by his desk. Jake barely looked up. "No, I got it." Maya gave him a knowing look. "You always say that." "Because it's always true." She shrugged. "All right, but you don't have to be a hero all the time." He smirked but said nothing. The truth was, he liked being seen as the guy who could handle it all. It reinforced his belief that he didn't need anyone. The breaking point. One Friday afternoon, Jake's boss, Mr. Reynolds, called him into his office. He was given a massive project, one that required not just a solid strategy, but also flawless execution. It had to be ready by Monday morning. "I need your best work on this, Jake," Reynolds said. "You're the best guy for the job." Jake felt a surge of pride. "I'll take care of it." Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "It's a big one. Feel free to pull in some of the team." "I'll handle it," Jake repeated, already mentally mapping out his weekend. By the time he left the office that night, the weight of the project was already pressing down on him. He grabbed a coffee and settled into his apartment, his laptop glowing in the dimly lit room. He worked through the night, barely stopping to eat, convinced that he was making progress. By Saturday evening, he was exhausted, but he kept pushing. His eyes burned, his back ached, but he refused to ask for help. This was his burden. He had to carry it alone. The collapse. Sunday morning, Jake woke up with a pounding headache. His work was far from finished, and the stress was unbearable. He stared at the jumbled mess of numbers, graphs, and reports on his screen, but his mind refused to process them. Then his phone buzzed. "Maya, hey, you good? Need a hand?" Jake stared at the message. His instinct was to type, "No, I'm fine." But for the first time, he hesitated. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. The exhaustion, the frustration, the overwhelming pressure, it all hit him at once. And before he could talk himself out of it, he typed, "Actually, yeah." Maya's reply was instant. "Be there in 20. Jake barely had time to process what he'd done before Maya, Alex, and Chris showed up at his door, armed with laptops, snacks, and coffee. They didn't waste time asking why he hadn't reached out sooner. They just sat down and got to work. Maya organized the research. Alex cleaned up the presentation slides. Chris checked for errors. They worked seamlessly, bouncing ideas off each other, solving problems Jake had been too burnt out to see clearly. And for the first time in years, Jake felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel. Relief. The realization. By midnight, the project wasn't just done, it was excellent. Jake leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen in disbelief. He hadn't felt this good about his work in a long time. Maya grinned. "See, teamwork's not so bad." Jake exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I guess not." Chris nudged his shoulder. "Next time, don't wait until you're drowning to ask for help, man." Jake chuckled. "Noted." The next morning, as he presented the project to Reynolds, he felt something shift inside him. When his boss praised the work, Jake did something he never did before. He gave credit to the team. Later that day, he found himself walking past a cafe and spotting Maya, Alex, and Chris inside. Normally, he would have kept walking. But this time, he pulled the door open and joined them. Because even wolves survive better in a pack. The shift. Over the next few months, Jake made small but significant changes. He collaborated more at work. He made time for friendships. He learned that strength wasn't about doing everything alone. It was about knowing when to lean on others. And he was better for it. Moral of the story: the lone wolf may survive, but the pack thrives. Don't let pride keep you from the people who want to help you. Strength isn't about carrying the world alone. It's about knowing when to share the weight.